For those who are planning to travel to Cebu, Philippines as a domestic or international traveler, this video will present the travel requirements that you need to prepare as of September 2021. Stay tuned and watch the video to know more. Welcome to DenZ TV. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you receive updates as they are posted. This video contains information about the following. LGU Quarantine Classification of Cebu. As of this time, Cebu Province is under GCQ with heightened restrictions, while Cebu City, Lapu-Lapu City, and Mandaue City are under MECQ or Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine. Domestic travel requirements for the 4 LGUs of Cebu, and international travel requirements for OFWs, non-OFWs, and foreign nationals arriving in Cebu. Let's start with Lapu-Lapu City travel requirements. As of this time, for all airlines, Philippine Airlines, Cebu Pacific Air, and AirAsia, there is a uniform set of travel requirements, and that is, for all inbound passengers, whether Apur or non-Apur, who shall enter the city of Lapu-Lapu through the airport, shall be required to present any of the following: a negative RT-PCR test result taken within the last 72 hours, or a negative antigen test result taken within the last 48 hours. The negative test result shall be presented to the airline prior to boarding. Persons traveling through the airport to any area outside Cebu Island shall not be required to present a test result unless it is required at the point of destination. Persons who shall enter the city of Lapu-Lapu from other local government units within the island of Cebu shall be exempted from the requirements. Let's proceed to the travel requirements for Mandaue City. Let's begin with the Cebu Pacific Air and AirAsia travel requirements based on the information presented in their respective portals. So for all inbound passengers, the same, a negative RT-PCR test result valid within 72 hours or a negative antigen test result valid within 48 hours. However, it's a different story for the requirements from Philippine Airlines, starting with returning overseas Filipinos and overseas Filipino workers, a negative RT-PCR test result, and a quarantine certification issued by the DOH Bureau of Quarantine along with a valid ID. For locally stranded individuals and returning residents, negative RT-PCR test result and a negative antigen test result, valid for 72 hours and 48 hours respectively, a valid ID, certificate of barangay residency, and complete address in Mandaue City with contact number. For tourists and non-essential travelers, the same, negative COVID-19 test result, valid ID, confirmed hotel booking, and a travel itinerary. For government Apurs, prepare your government agency ID, a travel order, and a travel itinerary. For private Apurs, negative COVID-19 test, whether RT-PCR test or antigen test, certificate of employment, work or travel order, company ID, travel itinerary, and a confirmed hotel booking or accommodation. We also have additional reminders for passengers of Philippine Airlines going to Mandaue City. You have to submit your travel requirements prior to your travel to the city of Mandaue to the City Tourism Office using the email addresses posted. The office shall send an email reply to the person concerned confirming receipt of the submitted documents and validating that the documents are complete and in order. The tourism office shall also be authorized to issue such confirmation or certificate to the requesting party. Now let us proceed to the requirements for Cebu Province, starting with the requirements from Philippine Airlines for returning overseas Filipinos and overseas Filipino workers. We have a negative RT-PCR test result and a quarantine certification issued by the Bureau of Quarantine and a valid ID. Next, we have LSIs or locally stranded individuals, negative RT-PCR test result valid for 72 hours or a negative antigen test result valid also within 72 hours and a valid ID. For tourists and non-essential travelers, negative RT-PCR test or negative antigen test, a valid ID, and a medical certificate. For private tours, we have a negative COVID-19 test result, whether antigen or RT-PCR swab test, a valid ID, and a seemingly redundant medical certificate. Government tours, valid ID, and a travel order. And for those passengers who do not have a Trace app, please download and fill out the Cebu Province Passenger Locator form found in the video description below. Still in Cebu Province, but via Cebu Pacific Air travel requirements. We have a uniform set of requirements for all inbound passengers, that is, a COVID-19 test result, whether an RT-PCR test or an antigen test. And lastly, for Cebu Province, we have AirAsia travel requirements, starting with tours and business travelers. Okay, a COVID-19 test result, negative COVID-19 test result to be specific, a valid ID, and a travel authority. For those all other guests traveling to Cebu Province, just present a negative COVID-19 test result. Let's proceed to the requirements for Cebu City, starting with the requirements from Philippine Airlines for OFWs and returning overseas Filipinos. A negative RT-PCR test result valid within 72 hours, a Bureau of Quarantine certificate, and a valid ID. For LSIs, non-essential travelers, and private tours, you need to present a negative RT-PCR test result valid for within 72 hours, S-Pass registration, and a TCP or TPP QR code. For government tours, present your government agency ID and a mission or travel order. For AirAsia travel requirements, starting with returning residents or LSIs, we have a negative COVID-19 test result and a TCP or TPP QR code via S-Pass. For returning overseas Filipino workers and returning overseas Filipinos, we have quarantine certificate from DOH Bureau of Quarantine, a valid ID. You are required to coordinate with OWA or DFA, and a TCP or TPP via S-Pass. For transit passengers, we have negative RT-PCR test result or a negative rapid antigen test result and S-Pass, TPP, or travel pass through permit. For tours, private tours to be specific, we have a negative COVID-19 test result, a TCP or TPP, QR via S-Pass, work or travel order, company ID, travel itinerary in Cebu City for the duration of stay, round-trip tickets, and a confirmed booking of accommodation. For government employees on official business, we have a negative COVID-19 test result, a mission or travel order, a government ID, and a TCP or TPP via S-Pass. Still in Cebu City, but now via Cebu Pacific Air, what are the travel requirements? So for LSIs, or returning residents and returning overseas Filipinos and OFWs, all of these categories have the same travel requirement, and that is a negative RT-PCR test result or a negative rapid antigen test result. For government tour, valid ID, and a mission order or travel order. For private tour, a negative COVID-19 test result. So there is no more S-Pass requirement for Cebu Pacific Air. For passengers coming from abroad, these are the international travel requirements via Philippine Airlines for those arriving in Cebu, such as OFWs, non-OFWs or ROFs, and foreign nationals. All inbound passengers are required to register via the online MCIA Passenger Arrival Registration Form. The link is provided in the description below. All arriving international flight passengers are required to register not earlier than 5 days prior to departure, and a TRN or a travel registration number will be generated once the registration is complete. For land-based OFWs, you have to create or update your account on the OFW Assistance Information System or OASIS. The link to that website will be provided in the video description below. For foreign nationals, you have to pay 901 pesos for your RT-PCR test. And to check who are the foreign nationals eligible to travel to the Philippines, please check the link at the top right corner of this video or in the video description below. If you are arriving in Cebu as a fully vaccinated traveler, whether you are inoculated in the Philippines or in a green country, please take note that you are going to qualify for a 7 days facility or hotel quarantine. Check the card at the top right corner of this video to view the updated list of green countries. The link will also be provided in the video description below. And those are the international and domestic travel requirements for Cebu as of September 2021. Thank you so much for watching. If you find the content of this channel valuable, remember to subscribe. Feel free to check out the other videos as well.